pick up some stuff in Bluetongue?
Yes, please, Chair, thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I'll encourage you both to keep the answers short if you're able to. I want to talk briefly about Bluetongue. Huge issue in my constituency is Suffolk Coastal. We were pretty much at the epicentre of the most recent late summer outbreak. What lessons have been learned? And Christine, can I start with you?
That's a good question. In the EU, so looking at lessons, Bluetongue is still a notifiable disease for us, and we're obliged to take government action. The EU have made it not notifiable. So and then make a choice as to whether government take action or not. It's a vector-borne disease. It spreads by midges. We can't control all of the infections. So the real question is that balance between the impact of government intervention, the effectiveness on disease control, and what costs that is having on farmers. Vaccination will help in terms of control, absolutely. There are 3 vaccines that are the Secretary of State permitted to be used. It's difficult. So one lesson is, how do we get new vaccines on the table more quickly? That's about the global vaccine supply chain, and is one of the things being discussed at the meeting I'm at.
Yeah. Jenny, is there anything to add on that?
So I think from an operational perspective, we're always learning the lessons when we're responding to different types of outbreak. As Christine says, Bluetongue is a vector-borne disease in much the same way as avian influenza, for influenza birds, for Bluetongue midges. I think one of the things that we're definitely continuing to learn and always are learning about communication with farmers, communication with the sector. We held a roundtable earlier in the year, both Christine and I were at that, which is about the decision making about what do we do with Bluetongue for the future and in the medium and the longer term. So I think for me the lessons that we're learning are around the degree to which the interventions that we've made in the last 12 months have impacted on industry, both the balance between the constraints that happen because of control zones, but also the protection that we maybe have been able to afford some of our more westerly counties, and where does that go as we go through the next 12 to 18 months, given that we know there will be a degree to which we cannot prevent the spread of that.
I think you touched on a point that I wanted to raise, which is the control zone. So obviously I met with a number of farmers in the constituency that have been affected and were during that time. There's real criticism and concern around the control zones and how effective they are, given the nature of how the spread of the disease. And I wondered if you can comment on that. And secondly, the lack of veterinary testing, so the lack of vets in order to carry out testing means that there was an issue locally to be able to access it. I wondered if you had any comment on that as well.
So on control zones, I'll let Christine speak as well. I mean, obviously we enact what we're there to enact, and so that's what our concentration is, and then we're there to facilitate as the agency movements within and beyond those control zones using our licensing regime, whilst at the same time performing the surveillance. But Christine.
Yeah, so when we first discovered Bluetongue, and Suffolk was one of our early counties, back in November 2023, we put in really tight control zones. They were quite small, but the restrictions in them were very heavy, and that was to reduce the chance of the virus overwintering. We were worried a warm spring would get disease in May, and then it would spread rapidly across the rest of the country. As it was, we didn't detect disease again until the end of August. We had much bigger restriction zone, trying to get that balance between stopping it spreading further west to the very dense livestock areas versus making the controls in the zone lighter. It's a really difficult balance. It depends on what sector you're in. We worked really hard with all sectors to try and get that balance right, of slowing it down, which I think we have done, but inevitably the midges will get ahead, infected midges will get ahead of any zones.
Right, and final question, how successful has the vaccine been, and what's the likely timescale for rollout?
So there hasn't been a huge uptake of the vaccine for various different reasons, I think, partly because we haven't had the level of clinical impact that they had in the Netherlands. We've not seen a large number of deaths. There have been some, but not in the thousands as was seen on the continent. The vaccines are permitted, but they're not fully authorised, and inevitably because it's individual farmers with their vet's advice making decisions about to use it. So some nervousness on using it, but we have much more confidence from the Dutch experience. There are varying reports of how efficacious different vaccines are. We welcome the vaccine companies putting forward a dossier to get full authorisation for the vaccines.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.